During the early years of his political career, Julius Caesar successfully passed through the main administrative positions, becoming famous for his irreconcilable struggle with rival conservatives. In 59 BC, he was elected consul and introduced a number of reforms popular among Romans. Public work made of windy hangdog mature and judicious politician. But truly historical fame Caesar brought his European conquests and subsequent return to Rome, which led to civil war. Toward the end of his consular term, Caesar appointed himself governor of Cisalpine and Narbonne Gaul, and immediately began his new duties. It is worth noting that the governor's tasks included more than just dealing with the boring administrative matters of the region. In fact, he became the representative of the Republic, its word and its sword. Given that the north of Italy was very turbulent in those days, the new governor had to conduct more than one military campaign. In previous years, Chief Ariovistus had brought 15,000 Germans to Gaul at the request of a local tribe for help. After providing the required assistance against his neighbors, he began his conquest of the Gallic lands. One of the Celtic tribes, Edui, appealed to Rome for protection, and the Senate authorized the governor of Narbonne Gaul to provide this assistance. Simultaneously with the growing threat from Ariovistus, and he already thought he was the leader of all the Gauls, the migration of the Helvetians began. They gathered on a journey from the territory of present-day Geneva westward, crossing Narbonne Gaul. Upon assuming his new post, Caesar faced serious problems and pondered how to keep the Republic from invading barbarians, but within the walls of Rome, insidious conspiracies were weaving against him. As during his consulship, Caesar did not bother to negotiate with the Senate. He strengthened the army at his own expense and declared war on both Ariovistus and Helvets. In a heavy battle at Bibracte, the Helvetians were defeated. Caesar allowed them to return to their homeland on condition that their country came under Roman rule. The whole of Gaul welcomed the victor and asked for help in expelling Ariovistus. Romans defeated dangerous neighbors near Ostheim. Ariovistus himself fled and soon died. Despite the friendly attitude to the barbarians, Caesar's goal was not the liberation of Gaul, but its conquest. He immediately began to reorganize the tribes under Roman rule, explaining that there was no other way to protect them from the Germans. Of course, not all the Gauls were not in agreement with this policy, and a wave of bloody clashes swept through the Gallic lands. Caesar promptly attacked the Gaulish villages and defeated opponents one by one, not allowing tribes to unite forces. In 56 Caesar prematurely declared the conquest of Gaul, and the Senate solemnly declared the territory a Roman province. Prone to imperialism, Romans fervently supported the conqueror. Julius himself returned to the governor's residence and sent Pompey and Crassus an offer to meet and discuss political plans. Further strategy of the former triumvirate included the extension of Caesar's powers for another 5 years, the appointment of Pompey and Crassus as consuls in Spain and Syria respectively. As was the custom of the time, everything was decided by bribery and the Romans' favorite urban beautification. By building public buildings for the entertainment of the citizens, it was easy to win elections. Caesar was able to continue his Gallic conquests. His goal was to convince the barbarians that peace, albeit under Roman rule, was better than war. Thus, Caesar was able to establish a secure border along the Rhine, defeating the Germans at Xanten and making 2 reconnaissance sorties into Britain. The islands of foggy Albion beckoned not only rumors of untold riches accumulated by their leaders, but also ore deposits. In addition, the British had previously provided assistance to the Gauls who had rebelled against Rome, which was seen as the presence of a potential enemy on the borders of the Republic. Caesar was kept from a large-scale British campaign by the extremely turbulent situation on the mainland. In 53 he crushed the Eburonian revolt and returned to Italy. The leader Vercingetorix united almost all the Gallic tribes against Rome. Caesar's position was aggravated by the fact that most of his army was concentrated in northern Gaul while he himself was in the south. Here he was helped by military cunning. A small detachment of Romans besieged Auvergne, then drew away the barbarians Vercingetorix. Caesar and a few companions managed to sneak north, where he united with the army and immediately ordered an offensive. The Romans captured Avaricus and Cenabus, but were stopped at Gergovia, meeting fierce resistance from the Gauls. From the support of Caesar refused once saved Aedui, who decided to push him into Narbona, Gaul. At this tense moment, Caesar decided to take a risk. With an army of 30,000 he laid siege to Alesia, where with an equal force was Vercingetorix. Just beginning the siege, the commander learned that from the north in support of the Gauls moving army of 250,000 people. Caesar ordered to build two walls, one between the siege camp and the city, the second around his army. The Romans resisted until the barbarian hordes disintegrated into several independent units that did not observe discipline, and the city began to starve. Then Vercingetorix decided to surrender the city and surrender to the mercy of the victor. The leader himself was chained and taken to Rome as an ornament of Caesar's triumph. The capture of Alesia not only raised Caesar to new heights of glory. Rome subjugated the entire territory of modern France, which was almost twice the size of Italy, opening new markets and postponing the barbarian invasion for another 400 years. For several centuries the Gallic lands were under Roman control. The Latin language, Roman law, all this became the foundation for subsequent European civilization. History can be extremely ironic. It was Gaius Julius Caesar who founded the Europe we all know. During his European campaign, Caesar proved himself to be an invincible military leader. Rome, which remembered his profligacy and political cunning, was amazed at this change. On the real amazement of the Roman aristocracy caused literary works of Caesar. In his usual brief and concise manner, in the commentaries, he set out not only the history of his conquests, but also the life of the Germans. This work is still one of the most sought-after materials on the ancient Germanic people. While Caesar continued his victorious march across the continent, Roman political circles were going through bad times. Without too much exaggeration, we can say that they plunged into the abyss of the most brazen corruption and incessant violence. Roman democracy was collapsing according to the formula written by Plato: freedom turns into permissiveness, and chaos leads to loss of freedom. No small part in this was played by Pompey and Crassus, whom Caesar helped to become consuls. According to their plans, Crassus was to conquer Armenia and the Parthian kingdom. Pompey, to put at the feet of Rome far Spain. However, both of them were not as successful as Julius Caesar. Crassus, towards the end of his consular term, gathered an army of recruits and marched into Syria. There he was defeated by the Parthians at Carrhae, lost his army and his own son. However, his own fate was even worse. Crassus was despicably killed in negotiations with the Parthian commander, and his head was sent for fun to the Parthian court, to represent the head of Pentheus in the production of Bacchanalia by Euripides. Pompey, for his part, never made it to the campaign. After the death of his wife Julia, he lost the last thread linking him to Caesar. Pompey also refused offers to strengthen the alliances with new marriage. Caesar was ready to give away his friend's niece Octavia, and himself asked for the hand of Pompey's daughter. But the marriages were not to be consummated. Pompey decided to stand in the struggle with Caesar for power, siding with the conservatives. The social life of Rome demanded change. The capital had been saved from the barbarians, but was itself on the verge of chaos. Agonizing democracy was buying votes, selling provinces and offices. Blackmail, assassination and plain urban robbery flourished. Poor people from all corners of the state flocked to the city for a better life. The right to vote was given selectively only to those who were willing to give it in the interests of the authorities. Amidst the systemic crisis, there was simply no political or police force interested in order and capable of bringing it about. Pompey did not fail to take advantage of the precarious situation. He brought an army into Rome and dispersed the rebellious plebs by demanding that the Senate appoint himself consul without a comrade. This wording no doubt sounded better than dictator. He enacted a series of reforms against corruption and cracked down on gangs. But he also abolished consular elections for politicians absent from the city. That is, Caesar. The city came to terms with Pompey's dictatorship and there was a brief lull. Everyone awaited the return of Julius Caesar. The commander himself no longer believed in the Republic and realized that he would have to restore order himself, stepping over his former friends. Caesar's powers ended in March 49, at which time he lost his immunity. To enter the struggle for consulship he could only in the fall of the same year, but, given the power of detractors, he would hardly be allowed to do so. Thus, Caesar had to choose between voluntary exile from Italy and knowingly lost trial. The Senate demanded from the commander to dissolve the legions, his only strength and support. Caesar tried to preserve diplomatic relations to the last. In the end, he even proposed the simultaneous removal from office of himself and Pompey. The idea found support in the Senate, but Pompey blocked the proposal. As a result, the Senate announced that Caesar must relinquish command, otherwise he would be declared an enemy of society. Caesar responded by asking to keep 1 legion out of 9 and to extend his powers for a year. Otherwise, war. Caesar hesitated for a long time before making an important decision. On the one hand, he had no formal rights not to fulfill the decisions of the Senate. On the other hand, the actions of the Senate could ruin Rome, because even civil war is not as destructive as incompetence and reactionaries in power. Caesar addressed the soldiers of his favorite 13th Legion and asked if they were ready to support him. The commander's authority was so great that not a single legionary refused. On January 10, 49, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the river delineating the southern border of Cisalpine Gaul. The die was cast, according to legend, pronounced the future dictator for life, as he headed for Rome with a single legion. Civil war became inevitable.